And we are live on YouTube on the CMS YouTube site. Good evening and welcome to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools budget engagement session. Thank you for joining us this evening. We are live on YouTube on the CMS YouTube site. Good evening and welcome to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools budget engagement session. Thank you for joining us this evening.
You can actually mute YouTube itself.
Yeah, sorry about that, everyone. I was connected with YouTube as well as on the Zoom meeting. Let me clarify that and start over again. Apologize for that. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening at the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools budget engagement session. We appreciate you joining us. Without further ado, I will now turn things over to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools Executive Director of Strategy Management, Angie Bartles, who will take us through the process for this evening.
Good evening, y'all. Thanks for joining us. I'll get us kicked off with our budget engagement session tonight. We are excited that this session will be interactive with our community and family and students. And in order to get your participation and hear your feedback, we're going to use a platform called Mentimeter. So as we launch tonight, would just like to take a minute to get everyone who's watching to log in. There are two ways you can do that. So there's a slide on the screen with a QR code. You can use your smartphone or device to hover over the QR code and it will take you right to our slide deck for tonight and the places that will ask for your input. Another way is you can use any web browser to navigate to the link at the top here. So it's www.menti.com. And if it asks you for a code, you'll enter 46730763. So we're going to pause for about a minute just to let our viewing public get logged into our session tonight. All right, I hope that was enough time. On the voting slides, additionally, there will be this Menti link and code at the top again. So when it's time for feedback, we'll direct you back to this site if you weren't able to log in just yet. So for tonight's community engagement session, we have two objectives. The first is we would like to share the investments that are under consideration for our 21-22 budget with our community. And we want to gather your feedback on those investments, specifically through the lens of how they may impact our students, family, and community partners. So with that, I'll turn it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Sheila Shirley, who will give us some context for our budget development process.
Good evening. I am Sheila Shirley, and I just wanted to share a little information about where we are in the budget development process as of now. You'll see that it is very much still in process. It's definitely not a finished product at this point, and our goal tonight is to get your feedback on some of the investments and areas that we are considering as we develop and finalize our budget proposal. There is significant uncertainty in many of our key budget drivers. For example, the revenue available from our primary funding sources, which would be our state and local funding sources in most years, are even less predictable than normal, obviously associated with the results of the pandemic and what that impact might be on those revenue streams. The enrollment projections are uncertain, but we do expect a decline in the current year projection for next year is anticipated. There's no official guidance on the salary and benefit increases as of yet from the state. Many of you may know that the state actually defines what our salary increase structure would look like year over year and our benefit rate increases. And the information is sometimes late getting to us, but without that official guidance, we will be making some estimates on that, but that is obviously a weighty budgetary impact. So it does drive uncertainty. The things that we do know or that we can anticipate significant unfinished instruction for many of our students in the coming year. We do know that we will have COVID response funding from the federal level available, which will be available to address acute student needs. The first bucket, I will call it, of funding is the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations. You may hear this referred to as CRSA. We expect about $142 million, and are anticipating that that will be available to us in the late spring of this year. There's also a potential for additional federal funding. The timing and amount is uncertain, although the legislation was passed today, as I understand it, and forwarded to the president for his signature. So we will be getting additional information about that in the coming weeks, I'm sure. The thing to think about when we talk about this COVID response funding is that we really need to be strategic in the use of these funds. First and foremost, we have to comply with the purpose and the restrictions of these funding streams. We need to recognize that these are one-time funds available, and for the buckets that we are familiar with and know presently, the current CARES Act funding, ESSER 1 we call it, and then this Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental, or CRSA. These funds will be available until September of 2023. The short use, we should use these funds for a short-term infusion of intensive support, knowing those deadlines on the use of these funds, but intensive supports for our students, our staff, and our facility needs. We want to minimize the risk to the extent that we can of a significant funding cliff and in terms of long-term investments. The final budget proposal will reflect purposeful alignment of all of our investments to the most appropriate funding sources. And I'll turn it over now, I believe, to the superintendent.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Shirley, very much. And so we know that it has been a year since our community, our country, and our world has been significantly impacted by the pandemic. We know that our students and our staff members have experienced a radical shift in their day-to-day lives in their learning environments. And so in addition to the needs that we know we have that existed prior to the pandemic, this budget, which has been developed through the hard work, the collaboration of our team members, our Board of Education. And so this budget is designed to address the needs that we have coming out of the pandemic. And so next slide. In our response, we believe we have to address three critical questions. And those questions are, one, how will we support all students? Secondly, how will we support teachers so that they can support all students? And then finally, how will we bridge the gap and accelerate learning? And so here's what we know for sure. We know that our response has to meet the needs of all of our students. And we also know that those needs vary from student to student. So what exactly have our students experienced? We know that there are some students who are thriving in a virtual environment. Those students have experienced very little unfinished learning, and they have seen some gains. We know this is something that works well for this group of students. Then there are some students who were able to engage in a virtual environment, but they still struggle. And so these students, they have some unfinished learning, and we know this just was not a normal or a regular year for them. And then there are other students for whom the virtual environment has not worked as well, and they have had huge struggles, and they weren't able to access their education the way that we had hoped. So these students have experienced some significant unfinished learning. Now, we know that addressing the needs of all of our students across the continuum of experiences will require that we meet the needs of our teachers as well. And so the response that we're developing absolutely must be geared toward building the capacity of our teachers who do this important work, who are privileged to do this work. And so we must absolutely build the capacity of our committed, dedicated, hardworking teachers to continue moving the ball forward. And with that, I am going to toss it over to Ms. Bartles to take us through the next part of our presentation.
Thank you, Superintendent Winston. So we now want to engage our audience and get your feedback on and perspective on the needs of our students. As the superintendent shared, that is the focus of our planning and our response and the resources that we're asking for the 21-22 school year. But from a parent, community, and student perspective, we want to understand how the pandemic has impacted our students and what from your lens are the most significant needs that our students have as a result of this past year. So on your phone, if you've navigated, or on your device, if you've navigated to the Mentimeter and are following along, you should now have a prompt that you can answer. It'll ask you, you have space to type in 3 responses, and it'll ask you to enter a word. You can enter up to 3 responses, but you could enter 1 or 2, and just highlight for us from your perspective, what are the most significant needs of our students based on the impacts of the past year. So we'll take about 2 minutes now to allow the viewing public to participate using the Mentimeter link. And if you need that link again, it's at the top of the screen here. So if you go to menti, menti.com, and enter 46730763, you should be given this prompt to enter the needs. So we'll pause and wait for some responses, and then we'll move on from there. We'll give it about 1 more minute for the viewing public to participate in the poll. Right. Well, thank you for your participation. What we're seeing on the screen is that the significant needs around social and emotional and mental health supports, additionally filling unfinished learning or gaps in learning, and then obviously a focus back on academics. We will continue to use this platform tonight to gauge your feedback. So thank you for participating this far. As the superintendent highlighted for you, there were 3 questions that have been guiding our approach. And the work we will share tonight is grounded in response to these questions. It's also grounded in response to our strategic plan, which is our guiding document for the work that we do in CMS. At the beginning of the establishment of our strategic plan, our board set 3 goals that would guide our approach through 2024. We then worked to set targets which articulate what the successful achievement of these goals would look like in 2024. And then annually, we plan our approach to this work, kind of what will get us there in the next 18 months based on our strategic planning and budgeting process. The results of that process are what we're going to share tonight, but I just wanted to highlight for everyone that really our work is focused on 6 key levers, which are here for you in the blue chevron. These 6 key focus areas are what we believe we can focus on to improve outcomes and advance toward these targets in the short term. They highlight where we will focus our effort, energy, and resources. And there were cross-functional teams who were established to really dive into these areas and develop a deep understanding of what they are and what we're currently doing to advance them and what issues or gaps must be solved in order for us to transform in these 6 areas. We think about these focus areas together, though, as a system rather than 6 discrete levers. We know and we believe that if we raise the level and complexity of content while building teacher knowledge and skill, if we increase social, emotional, and mental health supports, ensure all students have access to and experience success in advanced courses, maximize instructional time for our students, build a system to support district-wide implementation of supplemental and intensive academic supports, all while sustaining and improving high-quality support services and investing in our people, then we will graduate students with meaningful opportunities and cut the achievement gaps. So this is how the focus areas guide our work. And what we will do now is have each of the champions of these focus areas walk you through the strategies that are emerging in transforming each of these spaces and the investments that are up for consideration to help us fund those strategies. So I'll turn it over now to Ms. Akeisha Craven-Howell, who's our Associate Superintendent for Magnets and School Choice.
Thank you, Angie. When we think about access to advanced coursework, our vision really is that students have the opportunity to explore and articulate their interests, and that translates to a set of goals, and specifically post-secondary goals, that inform both their middle school and their high school plan. We want to make sure that students have the opportunity to talk with adults about their plan and their progress towards their goals, and that they have the opportunity to adjust that plan as their interests and knowledge about what's possible after high school and upon graduation changes. We think that in order to accomplish that vision, we have to make sure that students have lots of support. We need multiple ways to identify students broadly for opportunities for advanced learning. And those may include things like our academically and intellectually gifted identification assessments. It may also include things like the PSAT assessment. And certainly it includes opportunities like the school counseling dashboard, where a wealth of student data is available to the adults that support them. We also believe that we need to invest in school and staff supports. So what do schools need to help students explore their interests and to develop plans and to navigate those plans throughout high school? It's investments like our Access to 2024 program, which identifies students who might be oftentimes not identified for advanced coursework. It makes sure that those students are enrolled in those advanced courses and that they have the support to be successful. It's also supports like our AVID college readiness system. We have to make sure that we have a portfolio of high quality advanced courses and that those are equitably distributed throughout the district. These are courses like our career and technical education programs, advanced placement, international baccalaureate, Cambridge, Mac 1 as early as middle school, and dual enrollment opportunities with our local 2- and 4-year colleges and universities. And finally, we want to make sure that we are supporting the adults that we need to support the students. These are our teachers and counselors and other school-based adults, making sure that they have content-specific professional development, as well as development around their instructional practices, and importantly, anti-racism professional learning as well around the mindset and biases that sometimes have us to discount certain students and their relevance for advanced coursework. And with that, I'll turn it back to Ms. Bartles.
Thank you, Akeisha. So now we want to understand from a family and community and student perspective how these current investments that are being considered are likely to meet student and family need. So what you'll see now, if you're following along in our presentation on your device, is a prompt that will ask you to select the degree to which you agree that each of the investments listed are likely to meet the needs of students and families. So you can actually just use your finger or your mouse to slide the button across the bar to indicate if you strongly agree or strongly disagree with each of the investments' likeliness for meeting student need. So we will pause here and let our viewing public weigh in on the proposed investments for access to advanced coursework. Just wanted to make one note that as you go along, if you feel like you don't have enough information to weigh in on a particular investment, that's totally fine. There's a button beside each one where you can skip it before you submit at the bottom and press the blue button. So feel free to skip any investments that you'd like not to weigh in on at this time. But we'll pause, we'll give it 2 minutes here just to hear the feedback from the public. About 30 seconds remaining to add your input. All right, and that was our 2 minutes. So thank you for weighing in on these first 4 investments. What we see is that there is moderate to strong agreement that all 4 of the investment categories shared for advanced coursework are likely to meet student and family need. So thank you for weighing in. Next, we will transition to our great teaching focus area. And for that, I'd like to welcome Ms. Beth Thompson, who's our Associate Superintendent for Academics.
Good evening. It's good to be with you. In the area of great teaching, we have 3 primary areas. The first is what we use to teach. That would be our curriculum. The second is how we prepare to teach it, the development of skills of teachers. And the third is how we know what we're doing is working, which would be monitoring effectiveness. Our curricular potential investments include continuing the work that has already started with implementation across our entire district in a math and English language arts curriculum in grades kindergarten through 8th grade. A potential new investment for the upcoming school year would be expanding that work in math and English to grades 9 through 12, our high school level. We also want to make sure that for all curricular resources, we're able to ensure that they are able to support all of our students, including students who receive talent development services, English language learners, and any other students with unfinished instruction. Last but certainly not least, in the area of curriculum, we also have a potential investment in physical education in the format of physical education equipment to make sure that all of our schools have the same equipment and students have access to the ability to participate in physical education. In category 2, the professional development or development of skills of teachers, essentially for everything that we provide a curricular resource, we also want to make sure that we provide the ability and opportunity for teachers to be able to learn how to use it. That has 2 areas. One would be the skill and technique in using it, using those particular curricular resources. And the second would be ensuring that that teachers and all staff members have mindsets, values, and beliefs that can support the effective implementation and use of that curriculum with students. Last but certainly not least, we have many investments around assessments within our district. An additional potential investment would be to support knowing what students have mastered specifically in the area of world languages. Ms. Bartels, I'm going to send it back to you.
Thank you. So we'll follow the same process for the great teaching investments. There are 5 summarized for you on the screen. From the 9-12 math and English language arts curriculum to the middle school math and English content and PD specialist. So if you would just now, using your device and that Menti link, provide your feedback on the likeliness of these investments to meet the needs of students. We'll take 2 minutes on this slide as well. 30 seconds remaining. Right. Well, it seems that the comments from our public are that the curriculum, the professional development, and then the content and PD specialist are, they strongly agree would help meet student needs. And there is some neutral agreement around digital resources and the PE equipment. So thank you for weighing in on those investments. Next up, I will welcome our Chief of Staff, Ms. LaTarja Henry, to talk about the time focus area.
Thank you, Angie. This particular focus area is really focused on supporting students. We recognize that their ability to be in class actually will change the trajectory of their ability to succeed long term. So this focus area actually has three main areas. And the first is around suspension prevention and behavior support. We recognize that kids come to us and have been coming to us just as they are. And sometimes they need support and redirection around behavior. And we see this as a part of educating the whole child. So the first area of focus is around crisis prevention intervention. Training, which would allow our staff to continue to be trained on ways to provide in-time reaction and support the students who could be in crisis in the moment. Also, this area, the first part of this recommendation is that we would extend our funding for restorative practices, which really is focused on teaching children who have been harmed and who have done harm how to re-enter into school culture and community. A big part of this is really paying attention to how we are intentionally teaching kids how to respond when they don't have a great day. The next area is around suspension intervention. We actually are going to have a new short-term suspension site at Marie G. Davis, and also there will be intervention center coordinators pilots in a few of our schools, but we're actually going to reframe the way we provide in-school suspension opportunities in our schools. We really want to streamline that process and make sure that it is actually a process that is seamless in middle and high schools. And then last, there's staff support. We recognize that our ability to be able to support adults in this process is key. And so it really is about shifting mindsets and providing support by way of professional development to the adults in the classrooms and those who are in direct contact with students in the moment around behavior. And so to that end, we want to actually provide specialists in each of the learning communities so that they can be real-time support to all of the staff in the schools and the learning communities. This is also the area where we want to make sure that we are aligning our strategies around male resiliency and positive behavior. Another key portion of this is to make sure that we are being intentional about race power, bias, and anti-racism in our schools, and we will do that through a series of trainings. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we will do the same process for the time investments. So if you would just take a moment following along on your device and Mentimeter to let us know the degree to which you agree with each of these investments being likely to meet the needs of students. So same process as before, we'll take 2 minutes for the public to provide their feedback, and then we'll move on. 30 seconds remaining to provide your feedback. All right, thank you. So it seems that based on some public feedback, restorative practices and anti-racism training are strongly agreed would meet the needs of students. Additionally, the Intervention Center, the new ISS format, and the Universal Behavior Specialists and Learning Communities are likely to meet the need. Oh, and a change in real time. And then the short-term suspension site at Marie G. Davis was moderately likely. All right, next I will turn it over to Dr. Condra Ratley, who is our Associate Superintendent for High School Equity.
Good evening. When we reference student wellness, we're aiming to ensure that our students' social and emotional health does not prohibit them from a productive educational experience. Our goal is to increase social, emotional, and mental health supports for all students, while also contributing to a district culture that values the social and emotional well-being of all of its members. Emerging strategies are anchored in building staff knowledge and skill sets, high-quality tools and resources for our schools, and most importantly, providing direct supports to our students. Investments that are under consideration center on training and development of counselors, social workers, and psychologists, investing in SEL curricula on a K-12 continuum to support our school staff with building pro-social behavior skills of our students, and programs to promote healthy practices and minimize unhealthy practices. Other investments for consideration include direct support to students in need by way of mental health services, our district mobile crisis team, and value partners. We recognize that our students' social and emotional well-being is an essential component to a meaningful and enjoyable educational experience, and our investment considerations align with our goal to increase supports, especially in light of the pandemic and anticipating post-pandemic impacts. Mrs. Bartle.
Thank you, Dr. Ratley. So moving on in our process, we've summarized 5 of the investments shared for student wellness. If you would navigate to the Mentimeter and use it to provide your feedback on the likelihood that these investments will meet the needs of students. So we'll take 2 minutes on this slide as well. .30 seconds remaining for this slide. All right. And next, we'll move on to our academic performance focus area. And for that, I'd like to welcome our Chief Equity Officer, Dr. Frank Barnes.
Thank you, Ms. Bartles, and thank you to the listening audience for making time in your busy schedules to join us. Allow me to say that during the best of times, we welcome students full of promise and potential who have skills and knowledge, but because they're missing a set of foundational skills, they really struggle to academically grow and thrive. And if that's the case during promising times and the best of times, certainly during a pandemic, even more so that's the case. What we want to do is to sustain investments and make new investments to build a system that is system-wide and experienced universally in our district. It helps to identify students who need that extra assistance in those finite, fixed, and fixable areas, trains teachers to use those data to meet those students' needs, building on what they know, helps to make sure that we have evidence-based interventions. Evidence-based in that it's not just research-based in that the research says it could work, but evidence-based in that the research shows that it does work when done well and done exactly as the research shows. That we have a way to follow those students to make sure they get the right dosage, if you will, of that intervention to help them be successful, to fill those small gaps in those finite, fixable areas, but also then monitors their progress over time to see if that intervention's having the desired impact, if they need more or less, or maybe something different. The set of investments that we're looking at is a screener that is universally used in all of our schools. So no matter what school you go to, no matter what zip code it is, or how large or how small, or where other students go there, that they can make sure that they're screened properly. We want to invest in PD for our teachers so they know how to use those data. They just don't collect them. They're just not administering a test. They're collecting sensitive information to make sure that each child gets exactly what he or she needs. We want to invest in those interventions so that the licenses are there for every student, no matter how few or how many they are at a particular school across our district. And we want to take advantage of things our state has invested in. So we want to have a system so that we can meticulously monitor exactly how every student is getting supported and if they're making progress. We look forward to getting your feedback on these sets of investments. And again, we thank you so much for your time. Ms. Bartles, I hand things back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Barnes. So for the academic performance focus area, the investments are summarized for you on the screen. You could navigate to the Mentimeter and use it to rate your level of agreement with these investments, likeliness to meet the needs of students and families. So we'll take 2 minutes on this slide as well. All right, 30 more seconds. Okay, thank you for your feedback. It appears that there is strong agreement that the universal screener, English language arts and math interventions, and then professional development and support for those interventions are likely to meet the needs of students based on the perspectives of those who shared, and that data literacy development and our progress monitor are somewhat likely to meet the needs. Last but not least, we will highlight our health of the district focus area. And to do that, I'll welcome our Chief Human Resources Officer, Ms. Christine Peugeot, and also our Interim Chief Operating Officer, Ms. Sean Turner.
Thank you, Ms. Bartles. It's always a pleasure to be able to talk about some of our core investments in the very important supports that we have to support our core mission, namely our building resources and our people. So I'd first like to talk about our modernization project. This has been a multi-year project that takes several of our outdated and fragmented business systems and puts them into one comprehensive cloud-based system. This essentially improves our processes and efficiencies across HR, payroll, and technology, but that really impacts all of our employee workforce and even our external stakeholders, for example, our employees who are applying for job positions within our district. Essentially, by increasing that efficiency, we are able to focus on what matters most, and that is our students. Now, completion of this project will require the use of some local funding, and overall, we are within our budget. And part of this modernization program will also incorporate the background screening component of our contingent workforce. Sometimes that's also called our contracted workforce. So in other words, individuals or people who are not CMS employees. So we often use third-party agencies or other organizations to staff projects within CMS. And it's very important that just like with our regular CMS employees, that these vendors are also appropriately background screened. And by putting them into our comprehensive system, we can make sure that nothing falls through the cracks and that we are on top of this very important safety protocol for our students. Next up is our teaching residency coordinator. We are really excited about our teaching residency program, which is designed to recruit teachers from outside industries. So in other words, people who may not have an education degree, but they come from other professions. It's very important that we rely on that workforce because it also helps us diversify and bring people from all walks of life into our organization. So we provide training and mentoring and ultimately help securing licensure for these people who go through the program. We have worked hard to triple the size of this program over the past several years with much valued support from our CMS Education Foundation. Now, part of that support was to fund a very critical position that supports the residency program. And that position funding is no longer going to be available in the coming years. And the reason for that is because understanding that our efforts to increase a more diverse workforce and to attract and retain qualified teachers has become the primary focus. Our foundation is interested in continuing to help us fund this program through the use of scholarships for participants who apply and go through the multi-year program. This leads us to a discussion on our CMS beginning teachers, roughly half of whom, are alternatively certified. So it's critically important that we provide an adequate level of support and go beyond the normal resources that we would give to employees so that we can ensure that that employees have everything that they need, that they have the coaching, the support, the professional development, especially because they may be new to teaching roles. We employ approximately 1,800 new teachers every year. However, currently we have 6 coordinators spread out to support all of those teachers. So additional support in this area is much needed, again, to make sure that we not only provide those resources up front that directly impact the engagement and success of our students, of course, but also to retain those teachers to ensure that their first experience with us is a positive one and that they learn and grow over those first 3 years so that they can then become multi-year contracted teachers with our district. Next, I'd like to shift to talking about our employee relations department. Our employee relations department not only handles issues involving employees, or behavioral concerns or discipline, but they are also responsible for a wide array of compliance responsibilities that were recently absorbed to include, but are not limited to, unemployment, our Safe Schools training that provides critical resources and training, mandatory training to our employees across the district, drug and alcohol testing, and most importantly, our background screening. So these are individuals who actually focus on the background screening results that are received from the State Bureau of Investigation and make determinations on an individual's ability to be able to be employed by the district. So it's critically important that we have support in this area to make sure we maintain that safe environment for student learning and not only hire the most qualified applicants, but also applicants who would support a safe working environment for our children and be able to foster that. Finally, I'd love to talk about wellness support. One thing that we've learned since the beginning of the pandemic is that not much is more important than the health and well-being of not only our students, but our staff who support them. So this investment would be to create a comprehensive platform to provide multiple resources to employees that go beyond just the basic EAP services that are currently provided. And when we talk about well-being, it really runs the gamut from financial well-being, mental health, physical health, mindfulness. So all of those things that make up a whole, a human. And so it's critically important to have a happy and healthy workforce, and that's what's intended with our investments in employee wellness support. And I'd love to turn it over to my partner, Sean Turner, to talk about some of our additional resources here.
Excuse me. I'll begin by talking about preventive maintenance and sustainment of major capital components of our facilities. Strategy 3, the first 2 items, of course, deal with the preventive maintenance and facility sustainment. Over the years, taxpayers have made significant investments in our facilities, and we want to be good stewards of our taxpayer dollars by ensuring that we're performing the necessary preventive maintenance at all facilities to extend the life cycle of our major components. You may wonder, why is this funding so important to us? Well, we want to have committed and consistent funding for preventive maintenance and facility sustainment, because if received, it is expected that over time, it would result in decreased frequency of disruptions to delivering instructional programs, that it would increase funding to extend the life of our major system components, and that it would minimize premature failure of equipment in major system components. Studies indicate that for every $1 of preventive maintenance deferred, it will ultimately result in $4 of future expenditures. Examples of some of these services include HVAC filter services, sprinkler system inspections, fire extinguisher inspections, indoor and outdoor bleacher inspections, and pest management services, just to name a few. Over time, as our buildings age, we need to sustain the facilities by performing major system component replacements. We want to be more proactive rather than reactive. We were extremely fortunate 5 years ago when Mecklenburg County made a commitment to provide sustainment funding in the amount of $18 million per year to CMS for us to be able to replace chillers, boilers, tracks and tennis courts, gym floors, lighting retrofits, as well as many other very worthwhile projects at many of our school facilities. Transportation maintenance facilities, I want to talk about Downs Road and North Point. The funding we're requesting here is to allow us to provide a 20,000 square foot facility for our technicians that work on on our buses on a daily basis. This would allow them to perform tasks on those buses inside a facility rather than outside in the elements. Moving on to strategy number 4, health and safety, district-wide personal protective equipment. Each day, we receive daily updates in the news about what's happening in our county and also around the world as it relates to the global pandemic. Because this is such a fluid situation, we want to be prepared next year to provide personal protective equipment for our staff and students to ensure we are operating in the safest environment possible. This funding would allow us to continue to purchase items such as disposable masks, cloth coverings, hand sanitizer, face shields, hand sanitizer stations, thermometers, goggles, and a variety of other items to keep our staff and students safe. The Qualtrics symptom screening system is a product that we began using this year to help us to screen our staff on a daily basis utilizing this automated screening tool. As we begin our new fiscal year, we would like to secure funding to continue to utilize this tool, as it allows us to notify principals and department managers in the event that various staff members are exhibiting symptoms that would require them to remain at home. And then finally, security enhancements. Again, we have been very fortunate over the last years to receive funding from Mecklenburg County to make security enhancements at all of our facilities. In December 2020, Mecklenburg County reallocated funding for CMS to make additional security enhancements, with more than half of that funding being utilized to replace our camera servers at 99 school sites. This funding that we're requesting would allow CMS to replace the remaining camera servers at 64 schools, along with giving us the ability to replace our first line of defense, which is our exterior doors at our middle schools. I will now return it back to Christine Pajot for the conclusion of these strategies.
Thank you, Ms. Turner. So yes, I'm happy to discuss employee safety and compliance training and finally round things out with our fingerprint processing. So for employee safety and compliance training, we have utilized for the past several years a platform called Safe Schools. This is a platform that employees first begin to use when they from their first day of work as an employee at Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. So they can find important resources like our technology use agreement, training around things like harassment in the workplace, even enhanced training that we are focused on to commit to a diverse and equitable environment. So there are a variety of courses that are made available to employees, both on a voluntary basis, a supplemental basis, and also for mandatory compliance reasons. So this investment would be simply continuing that in years forward. Our fingerprint processing is something also that our district has done for the past couple of years. This specifically relates to our fingerprinting processing through State Board of Investigation. This fingerprint processing was always carried through. However, it wasn't reflected as an item in our last year's budget. And this is simply to ensure that it is properly coded in that budget so that we don't have to reassign funds to be able to make sure that we continue with the very important function. It really almost goes without saying that we continue appropriately background screening our employees, which involves a mandatory fingerprint check that's run through the State Board of Investigation. Thank you.
Thank you both. So we will move on to complete our feedback process for this portion of the evening with health of the district. The 5 investments are summarized for you on the screen, and we'll just take 2 minutes for folks to weigh in on the likelihood that these investments will meet needs of students and families.
Ms.
So-
Bartles,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
realized that I did not go over insourcing of substitute management.
Okay.
Would you like me to do that at this time before our guests vote?
Yes, please.
Okay, absolutely. So currently, many people may be aware or not that our substitute management is really divided between Title I schools and non-Title I schools. So a couple of years ago, our district hired a vendor to provide substitutes for our Title I schools exclusively, while our non-Title I schools are staffed through CMS substitutes. We're exploring an initiative to have a district-wide solution for substitute management. We have heard loud and clear, especially in the recent year with the pandemic, just the importance of having an adequate subpool, not only for the purposes of filling those day-to-day absences of teachers, but more importantly, the long-term absences. And our substitute pools really can serve as another way to attract and recruit qualified teachers in years to come. So there are plenty of reasons why we want to have a robust management system to directly support our teachers, our principals, and ultimately our students. And by doing so in a district-wide manner, we can ensure that we have district-wide initiatives that not only support the schools that need it the most, but provide enhanced levels across the district to all of our schools. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So now we'll start the clock on our 2 minutes for feedback on these 5 investments regarding health of the district. About 30 seconds remaining on this slide. All right, well, that was our time. So thank you for your feedback. It seems that there is moderately strong agreement that employee wellness support, preventative maintenance, and security enhancements are likely to help us meet student and family needs, and that insourcing substitute management and the coordinators for various positions are somewhat likely based on the perspectives of those who shared. So thank you all for your feedback thus far. So moving on, before we conclude our presentation this evening, we wanted to build in some time to answer any questions from the viewing public. So if you're following along in your Mentimeter platform, you should now see a button on your screen where you can open the Q&A. And if you open the Q&A, you can just freeform type your questions into the box that's present and click submit. And then as folks submit their questions, they should pop up on your screen if you're following along on your device. And you can actually click the little thumbs up button to the right of the question once they appear, and it will upvote a question. So if you agree with something that someone else has asked, or you have the same question, you can click that thumbs up, and it will indicate to us that multiple people would like us to address that. So we're going to pause for another 2 minutes here to let the public formulate their questions and enter them into the space. And then we will take some time with our experts on the call to answer what's most pressing to you. So we'll pause for a few minutes to let you formulate your questions, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so it appears we don't have any questions yet. We'll give it one more minute in case folks are typing, and then we'll move on. All right, well, that's our 2 minutes, and it looks like we do have one question. It is, why is social emotional learning so important to the work that educators do? To that, I'll turn to my colleagues, Dr. Ratley, Dr. Barnes, Ms. Thompson, and anyone else who'd like to weigh in to this question.
Good evening, this is Dr. Ratley. I would add that social emotional learning is important to the work that educators do, because if not addressed, could actually become a barrier in a number of ways for helping students engage in the academic setting. And so the idea is around supporting the whole child, so that not only are we meeting their needs academically, but also in terms of what their social and emotional well-being may be at the time.
Thank you. And it seems we have no other questions at this point in time. So based on that, we'll move forward with our presentation. And with that, I will turn it over to our superintendent to close out our process tonight.
Well, thank you again, Ms. Bartles. And I want to also take this opportunity to thank members of our viewing public for joining us this evening. And I want to say a special thank you to our staff members as well who have joined us for this presentation. I want to also ask that members of our viewing public continue to engage throughout the remainder of our budget process. I think that's extremely important. And so I want to conclude my remarks by again expressing my appreciation for your engagement, your enthusiasm about this work. And I hope that everyone has a good rest of your evening, and hope everyone stays safe. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for your time tonight. We have on the screen the next steps for our budget process, and just wanted to highlight 2 public-facing events that are upcoming. We'll have community engagement events on the 25th and 30th of March, which is following the superintendent's budget recommendation on the 23rd. And then there will be a public hearing at the board meeting on April 13th regarding the budget recommendation before the board vote on April 27th. So we hope to see you at future community engagement events, and we thank you for your time tonight. Good night.